Clemson is the team in the ACC. Nobody's close. That's what we all have in our minds and have since they, again, won the ACC championship last year, blasted Miami in the title game, and ever since they stepped off the field, losing to Alabama in the playoffs 24-6, and that great all-time defensive line all came back, decided to shun the NFL draft, come back and win a championship. Clemson has been that team. They struggled early on offense. They've got it together under Trevor Lawrence. They are rolling. Nobody outside of Tuscaloosa comes close to them in regards to caliber of play right now. 9-0, 6-0 in the ACC. But somebody has the opportunity to derail a championship. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the big game on ABC, Chestnut Hill. Yes, Chestnut Hill, ABC primetime. Boston College at 7-2, 4-1 in the ACC. They're the only team in the division that has yet to play Clemson. Therefore, they're the only team in the ACC Atlantic Division who hasn't lost to Clemson. Therefore, despite the one loss for BC in the ACC, they took a downer at North Carolina State 28-23. BC can win this game, and they would have the tiebreaker against Clemson. So if BC can pull off the major upset as a 3-touchdown underdog and then stay clean the rest of the year and win all its ACC games, regardless of what Clemson does, regardless of what the polls say, even though Clemson's got the little tiny 2 number next to their name and BC is barely in the top 25, Boston College would go to the ACC championship game. Let's see if it can happen. I'm going to take a quick look at Clemson, then we're going to go to Dan Rubin from Eagles Unlimited to break down Boston College. All right. Measuring dominance in college football statistically goes to the line of scrimmage, and Clemson is the very best statistically in college football. You've got to, of course, take the schedule into consideration. They're number 1 in yards per carry rushing the football. They are number 1 against the run, yards per carry in college football. That is dominance at the line of scrimmage, the point of attack. Travis Etienne having a great season. He is 1 yard shy of 1,000 rushing the football. 8.6 yards per carry, 15 touchdowns. He is the all-time rushing leader at Clemson in yards per carry this year and career. Trevor Lawrence has transformed the offense, much like Tua Tagovailoa did with Alabama in replacing Jalen Hurts. Trevor Lawrence with 18 touchdown passes, only 3 interceptions. It's a wide-open attack, 65% completion percentage. So they run first. That's what they like to do. But, of course, Lawrence can ride the offense. And Dabo Swinney actually fooled us all and made the right decision in letting Kelly Bryant leave when he did. Trevor Lawrence is the man. They have an elite defense, one of the best in college football. We mentioned the defensive front that can't be challenged in terms of its NFL draft status. It is the best, the most talented defensive front in college football. The defense is top 5 level. Clelin Ferrell would be the obvious All-America pick because of the stats that he's compiling right now. Far and away the best because they rotate so many guys up front and because they allow their linebackers and safeties to come up and make plays. So the stats won't jump off the page, but we know what the scouting reports in the NFL say. We've watched these guys play together for so long. Clelin Ferrell, though, in terms of All-American consideration with 12.5 tackles for loss and 7.5 sacks, looking to be the All-America candidate and named to the team at the end of the year. So it's more important, though, about the team and Clemson facing some weather possibilities at Boston College on Saturday night. BC comes off a nice winning streak. They knocked off Miami a couple weekends ago that really placed them front and center in terms of trying to make this push toward an ACC championship. BC at 7-2, 4-1 in the Atlantic. Again, they will win the tiebreaker. Obviously, have to overcome the big challenge with Clemson coming to town. Now let's take it to Dan Rubin from Eagles Unlimited. We talked Clemson and Boston College a couple nights ago right here on Mark Rogers TV. And then I'll come back with my prediction.
Yeah, my I gotta tell you the excitement level up here. I was saying to a couple people, it's Wednesday. It feels like some days that the week is flying by and that we're ready for Saturday already. And oh my God, I can't believe it's almost here. And then on the other day, I can't believe it's not almost here. Like these are some long days getting ready for Saturday because the excitement up here is you're just sitting back and you're waiting. This is, I think, the biggest game in probably 10 years. If as a Boston College fan, this is it. This is our Super Bowl right now.
Absolutely. So, Dan, you know that we sometimes try to play the role of educator here. And because most of College Football Nation, they get locked into those numbers that we put on the left side of the name of the team. And when they see 2 versus nothing or 2 against 22, there's not a whole lot of thought given to, well, this game is really meaningful. Other than, well, the team with the 2 next to their name, they better not lose any games because they got to make the Final Four. But there's something called a conference race and a conference championship and a division race. And that only includes those games that they play within the conference. So we've got some classic cases of that across the country. Pitt right now sitting atop the ACC Coastal Division. Oh, forget the 5-4 record. I know it's ugly, but they had to play the gauntlet of Central Florida, Penn State, and Notre Dame. Northwestern sitting at 5-4 right now. They control the Big Ten Western Division. And similarly, although they have a much better record right now at 7-2, BC, regardless of the way Clemson appears to be dominant right now, this is a head-to-head for the division lead and a possible trip to the ACC championship game.
Yep. BC is the one team in the ACC Atlantic that controls its own destiny, which is, and so does Clemson. I mean, if Clemson wins on Saturday, the race is over and the Tigers are in, regardless of what happens against Duke. But those are the only 2 teams left, I should say, that control their own destiny. Clemson 6-0 in conference, BC 4-1. If BC wins on Saturday, they've got 2 conference games left. Clemson only has 1, and Clemson would need BC to lose another game in order to make the ACC championship, which is amazing considering that they could finish the season 11-1 and not make the conference championship. They could conceivably even go to the playoff with an 11-1 record and not make the conference championship game. BC, on the other hand, 7-2, 4-1 in league. Syracuse behind them needs some help from BC to beat Clemson, to lose to Duke, and then Syracuse to win out, which would include a head-to-head game against BC on the last Saturday of the season. So this is a huge weekend for ACC, for the ACC, especially the ACC Atlantic. The implications of this game are rife. This is what I mean when I say it's probably the biggest game in 10 years for Boston College football, is because they haven't had a chance this late in the season to put a stamp and get into first place of the division since 2008 when they last made the conference championship game. So this is a huge game, is for that reason, for both teams.
Just had a Clemson caller on the line a few callers ago, and I was trying to let him know that basically this BC offense is not hugely dynamic. It's not one of the first offenses we gravitate to across the country in regards to explosiveness, but this is the best Boston College offense since when? Anthony Brown's playing extremely well. This is the best passing attack with the best weapons that we've seen. And of course, A.J. Dillon is a premier top 3 running back, top 5 running back in the country. The offensive line is extremely experienced. If there's an offensive line in this conference that can deal with that defensive line, it's this one. Those first 3 drives, Dan, against Miami in particular, and I think they, in a sense, kind of closed it down, went into a shell, and kind of protected that 2-score lead most of the rest of the game. But those first 3 drives where they went touchdown, field goal, it was a thing of beauty the way they orchestrated those drives with the various formations and the whole deal. BC, they can look extremely good on offense.
Yeah, and just pulling up some of the stats over here, when you look at some of the numbers don't really, I think, jump off the page as being, wow, flashy numbers. You're still looking at under 2,000 yards passing from the quarterbacks. Brown only has 1,500 yards passing, and A.J. Dillon missed a couple of games with an ankle injury, re-injured his ankle last week against Virginia Tech, and he's only got 900 yards. So you're looking at an offense that beats you through a variety of dynamic type of ways, which is, we're going to control the clock, drag the game, but we're still run tempo. Against certain teams, we're going to run warp speed and try to pound and ground at a faster clip. And that's what happened against Miami and Virginia Tech in the later on in the second half, because the offensive line was able to contain and get the creativity of the offensive formation. So there's a lot of tight ends. It's very different than what fans might be used to in the more modern the spread option, a lot of the run and gun, fun and gun type of teams, because they're able to go no huddle, BC, and switch it up by playing a lot of 12 men, a lot of 12 formation, 21 formation, 22, 13 with 3 tight ends and 1 running back. They're going to be a team that doesn't wow you necessarily with the streak up the sidelines. Look at this guy run a 4.3 40, but they're going to be the team that you look at the end of the game and say, well, they had 450 yards of offense and it was perfectly balanced between the pass and the run. How'd they get here? The quarterback only threw for 175 yards, but they still threw for 250 because they had a wide receiver throw a couple of passes, or they had a running game that ran a little bit of option and read option, and the pull block sprung the one big play. So again, not dynamic in a sense that it's going to, steamroll somebody with wow factor, but they are capable of doing that.
So, Dan, when you look at the Clemson dynamic right here, they are really rolling right now. We know what the talent is there. So even when they were struggling, it seemed to be a matter of time, although the quarterback situation was up in the air, obviously, with Kelly Bryant in place for the first handful of games, and people wanting to know and to see. And we have gotten our dose of whether Trevor Lawrence is ready for the spotlight and ready for the job. And yes, he is. And so now we're seeing the Clemson team that we expected to see, that's dynamic all over the place. And maybe you're not catching them at the best time right now.
Yeah, I was doing an interview with a Clemson radio show yesterday, and they asked me, what worries you? Is it the running game with Travis Etienne, or is it the passing game with Trevor Lawrence? And I just said yes. I think both of it worries me, because this is an offense that's clicking on all hails. I don't think anything that they've done the last 4 weeks is by accident, or even this whole season. I think you go back to that NC State game, Lawrence threw for 308 yards, 314 yards against Florida State, and he didn't have to really throw the ball against Louisville all that often because they just steamrolled Louisville with 77 points. So you're catching Clemson rather, at a time when they are clicking. And defensively, you have to wonder if they can stop them, BC. I don't necessarily think you're going to stop Clemson from getting yards. I think the way that you beat them is just to limit possessions, because you cannot stop this offense all game long, and you cannot stop them from getting theirs. And so you have to limit their possessions with your ball control on the offense, drag this game out a little bit more, get your stops, limit Clemson to 3 instead of 7, limit explosive plays, let them get 400 yards of offense, 450 yards of offense, but let them do it between the 20s. Let them bend, let them hold them to field goals, hold them to red zone stops. And then every team, I don't care who you are, makes a mistake at some point during a football game. Everybody does. The question is whether the throw's off the line, whether the running back misses the hole, whether somebody misses a block, or a defensive back falls down, or whatever it is. Connect when that play presents itself. You wait for those opportunities. Clemson will present it. Every football team presents it at some point. And that's when you capitalize. You get the turnover, you get the big stop, or you make the big play.
I'm looking at the game scores and kind of processing what I've seen. I saw every play of the Miami game. I saw a lot of the NC State game, which you got down early, really out of the game, or so we thought. I think there was a blocked punt mixed in there and some big plays on defense, and the offense got it going and gave North Carolina State a scare at the end there, 28-23. Saw much of the Wake Forest game, that being an ESPN game that was moved up due to the hurricane. Did not see the Purdue game. They would be the one near prolific offense that I could compare to Clemson, maybe not in regards to the star rankings next to the personnel, but this Rondale Moore certainly can play anywhere in college football, and the way David Blau's been playing for the last 6 weeks, he's pretty dynamic. So you've seen something comparable there, and with some of the talent that NC State brings to the table on the outside with Kelvin Harmon and obviously Ryan Finley at the controls. Miami might be that team, but they just don't have the guy under center that can make it happen. So those guys running down the field can be wide open. If the guy can't get the ball to him, that's not going to happen. So you've seen parts of what you're going to see on Saturday night at times.
Yeah, and that NC State game is a great case study because BC got down pretty quick. It was only 7-3 at the end of the first quarter, but then in the second quarter you give up the 14 points, and Finley had been chucking the ball all over the field on you. They finished NC State with over 500 yards of offense, and it was 21-3 at halftime. You come out in the third quarter, you're unable to get the ball moving, and then you give up a 7 or 8 minute drive that doesn't result in anything, but you still gave up a 7 or 8 minute drive at that point. Give up the last score, and then with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, you're down 28-3. I know the exact percentage, by the way, that when you're down 28-3 with 2 minutes to go in the third quarter, you have a 99.6% chance of losing the football game, and that's because I'm a Patriots fan. But at that moment, the way that the BC had come back or had to claw back, you really had to play a perfect game to even make the comeback. And they proved that they could. They started making turnovers. They started forcing NC State into making mistakes. In that fourth quarter, a couple of long drives, preventing it, holding the time of possession battle, and being able to move the ball gets you in position to win the game. Now, you can't have what happened in the first half and have the inconsistency, in particular with that game, because you're unable to make the comeback. I think even if you play a little bit better in the first or second quarter, we're not talking about a 28-23 loss. In terms of the Miami game and what kind of presented there, it was kind of the opposite, which was you come out, warp speed, heavy tempo, put Miami on their heels, a lot of emotion in the stadium, and you build the lead. It was red bandana night at Alumni Stadium, so it was a big deal. Team played with a lot of energy, a lot of heart that night. And then in the second half, you realize, wait a second, we can control the clock, kind of run a little bit slower, not play to protect the football, not necessarily play to sit on a lead, but realize that you could hold the Miami offense within its box, because if Miami had to step out of their game, you had them beat whenever Miami had to make plays that they weren't capable of making. So what does that mean against Clemson? Well, Clemson's going to have a lot better of a quarterback than Miami, and they're probably going to have a lot better of a defense than what NC State played in the second half. So I think you have to be able to take the first half from the Miami game, where you played exceptionally well, and combine it with the second half of the NC State game, where you were still had your foot on the accelerator in order to come back. If you can play that game, and what I mean by that is perfect execution of a perfect game plan, then you'll find yourself in that 13%, which I think ESPN FPI said 88% chance of Clemson victory. You sit in that 12% by perfectly executing the perfect game plan and taking pieces of what worked from those first and second halves.
I'll buy that. We've had a couple games in that point spread range of where it sits right now, about 19 or 20. Pulled off by a BYU against a Wisconsin, pulled off by an Old Dominion, most famously against a Virginia Tech. Those two come to mind right off the top of my head. And we've had several around the 2-touchdown level, Tennessee, Auburn, Kentucky, Florida. But maybe the difference here is that Boston College is more capable than the teams that pulled off most of those upsets. But Clemson is at the highest rung of the highest rung, right next to Alabama, in regards to trying to avert disaster. And so it should be very interesting. So, Dan, I'm going to ask you defense. I'm going to ask you about the crowd. So let's go defense first in regards to trying to make this happen. We talked a lot of offense for BC. We talked a lot of Clemson offense. How's the defense playing? I only saw the score from Virginia Tech. I didn't track that game and didn't see it.
The defense has been playing great, and it's been synergetic, which I think that I've used the term synergy with you, Mark, at least. Of how many times have I used that term when I talk about BC? I think I use it at least twice abroad.
This time around.
Yeah, that's one. So I'm good for at least 2 or 3 more. The defensive line has been fantastic. The edge rushers, Zach Allen, starting to prove why I think he's going to be a big factor on Sundays. Even if they move him back to linebacker, or how he projects. Wyatt Ray has played out of his mind at times. Has has made a couple of big sacks. And with the two of them crashing around the edges, you fill the middle with two strong defensive tackles. Ray Smith does a really good job of playing on the opposite side of the line. And Tanner Carafa has been a pleasant surprise in addition to the defensive line for BC. When you're getting back into the linebackers, I think that I'm not going to call that the worry, but considering the strength of the defensive line and the strength of the secondary, the linebackers become when you're grading out an A versus an A minus or an A minus to a B plus. What's the difference between an 80?
Hopefully, we still have Dan with us. Maybe Dan will notice that he's locked up. I believe our transmission is fine. There you go, Dan. I think
there I go. Okay, there we go. So, from a linebacker standpoint, I think when you compare the front four to the back four, you're looking at linebackers who are good in coverage. My only fear is against the speed rushers. If they get speed running backs like Etienne, if Etienne gets a hole, can they fill the hole and be able to tackle him? I think a guy like Isaiah McDuffie, who has played very, very well in coverage, he's going to have to develop very quickly his run stuffing ability. Connor Strahan has been the heart and soul of this defense, coming back for his 5th year. But, he also hasn't faced a running back of the caliber of Etienne or anyone else for that matter who runs for Clemson. And then, you're looking at guys that Max Richardson, who, again, plays very physical, but they have to come up with the right stop at the right time because a speed running back through a hole, you don't have a Luke Kuechly or a Mark Herzlich who's going to, sprint and fill that hole when a guy misses an assignment. So they're very good, but my question is, and this is something that I think I've said a number of times, is how they will be against the run. Not if they can stop the run, how they can stop the run, and how within the game plan they can. Back in the secondary has been phenomenal. They've made a couple of changes through the games, but I think anybody who watches the Boston College no-fly zone defense, as they're called, will be incredibly impressed. They're one of the nation's best at interceptions, and these are guys who can stop anybody. Brandon Sebastian was just named the ACC Player of the Week for the secondary, or Rookie of the Week, I think. Lucas Dennis is a force. Tajamir Torres, Will Harris is a physical type safety. This is a complete defense, and even if a linebacker gets out in coverage or has to step up, a safety or a cornerback can cover them. And I don't necessarily know that a complete team defense, you can have a number of first-round picks on your defense that are great individuals. It's how you play together. And from a Boston College standpoint, the system has always worked, and the system has worked this year. So it remains to be seen, though, again, can they do it against Clemson?
Got Dan Rubin on the line from Eagles Unlimited, biggest game of the season this year, certainly, and going back several seasons for Boston College, as they can still win the ACC. Yes, they have one more loss than Clemson, but in the ACC, Clemson's got 0. Well, they got 2 more losses than Clemson. They've got 0, of course, Clemson, and just the 1 loss in conference play against NC State for Clemson, meaning they force the tiebreaker. They win the tiebreaker if they can win this head-to-head matchup in Chestnut Hill as a 20-point underdog. So what is the atmosphere going to be like? Of course, we're not talking 100,000 people. We're not talking about some of the typical settings that we see in college football on a Saturday night at Penn State or somewhere like that. So can that be a factor for this team to ride the wave to an upset?
Well, I think so. The game's already sold out, so 44,500 people will be in Alumni Stadium. Whether or not that's all BC, I know Clemson always travels well, and some people have probably decided to make this their November vacation. So I'm sure there will be Clemson fans, but 44.5 doesn't sound like a lot, especially in comparison to Florida State or even to Clemson. But it's a small stadium. Everybody's on top of each other. It gets very, very loud, very, very fast. And the atmosphere wise, it's going to be insane because the stadium's built up. And again, it's small, it's cramped, it's right in the middle of campus. From the rest of an atmosphere standpoint, Boston College, where it's coming into this game at a very unique time. just in the city of Boston. The Patriots are obviously rolling. That they're always going to have the attention at this point. And a week and a half ago, we were parading down Beacon Street or Boylston Street with the with the World Series trophy. Um, Boston has reinvented itself time and time again, from a football town to a baseball town to a basketball town to a hockey town. And the general consensus now is that with game day coming to town, and I was just in a barbershop today, in one of the city towns, and I was told specifically, "Oh yeah, game day's coming here." So it's now a college football town, even if it's just for 1 week. So it's going to be wild up here. It's the fans are really going to turn out. I think this is a day that everybody has been craving for. You don't play an ESPN ABC 8 p.m. game on a Saturday in November with game day in town unless that game demands that attention. It doesn't just happen in November. So the city has taken notice. The fans have taken notice. The students have taken notice. We get an extra hour of tailgating before the game. The town and the school has been able to extend that by an hour, so you get 4 hours before the game to cook up your brats and get in the stadium. So it's going to be wild. It's going to be something that I think a lot of people are ready for. They've been waiting for, and I'm very much looking forward to see the city of Boston become a college football town for the weekend.
Dan, as much as I was captivated by that entire picture you were painting of the scene and the setting and the vibe, and Boston being a great sports town, the feel of the game leading up to that, I was most captivated, and I latched on to you being there at the barber shop, because I just thought you took that look with you all the time. It never changed. There were no necessary trips to the barber shop.
If you could paint a picture of a barbershop in Boston, in the guys who are sitting in the barbershop in Boston, and I realize that now my accent's coming out too. If you had to paint the picture, the "We Are All Patriots" flag on the side of the wall with the 5-time Super Bowl champions logo, the TV's on, the guy who works for the MBTA sitting in a chair, and they're looking at you saying, "We got college football coming here, kid, this weekend." That is a stereotype come to life. And that was where I was. And those guys have latched on now for college football, and they're ready to get wild this weekend too, which is a very different feel than I think what some people maybe are used to up here.
Yeah, Dan Rubin on the line from Eagles Unlimited. Dan has joined us for a number of years to talk Boston College football and the ACC. So, Dan, I have no issue with whether you are completely incapable of making any kind of prediction on this game. You don't need to make it right here. So I just didn't know if that was a weekly exercise of yours to make predictions on football games or concerning your beloved Eagles, or you were incapable of trying to make some kind of unbiased selection.
Well, I'm totally incapable of making an unbiased selection, but I will give you the key, and this is going to be my key when I write up the weekly preview on what to watch for this week, and I'll give away the punchline at the end, which is BC to win this game has to drag this game into the fourth quarter. They have to control the clock, drag the time of possession out. They have to drag Clemson into the fourth, like they did last year down at Death Valley. If they can, they have a lot. They can't get into a shootout in this game. You cannot win a shootout against Clemson, let alone a team that might not have AJ Dillon on Saturday, given how his health goes during the week. Game time decision. That's all we know. You can win that game if you control the clock, own the time of possession, keep Clemson's offense off the field, and hold them to field goals instead of touchdowns. Do that. And in that fourth quarter, you're going to be looking at a low-scoring tie game, just like last year. The only difference now is, can Boston College finish it, where last year Clemson scored 3 times in the last 5 minutes?
Dan, basically, you are reciting the script that you've given me, I don't know how many countless times, anytime the matchup has been Clemson, or in the past when they were good, Florida State. That's been the formula.
That's the formula. It's not. The one thing I love about Steve Addazio, his offense or his game plan, is that he's not afraid to make it simple. And when it's simple, it'll be complex within the simplicity, which is, it's a simple way to win. But you know what? 7 times this year it's worked, and could have been 8, probably could have been 9 at this point, for all we know.
So you bring up Steve Adazio. It's 7-2 right now. It's typically been 7-6. Just the one down year. Is the fan base come around and really embraced him?
I think so. I think this year especially, everybody went into this year, myself included, saying, "Boy, I hope they can get over the hump from 7-5 to 8-4 or 9-3." And certainly they've done enough at this point to be in position for that. But you look over the last few years, and BC really needed to develop a way to beat the Miamis and beat Virginia Techs, because in the past they don't win those games. And you finish 7-5, and you're going to the Sun Bowl maybe, or the Pinstripe Bowl maybe, or you're going back to Shreveport for the Independence Bowl. So I think getting over that hump and getting to that point shows the tangible development, rather than me sitting here saying, which is something that I really do believe in too when I say this, that you can be a good 7-5 in this conference. Everybody's good enough to finish 9-3. Someone has to finish 7-5 in that scenario. You can be a good team and finish 7-5 in this conference. And you'd like to be 9 wins, but hey, you lost 2 games. They were close. It was maybe a difference of 5 to 15 plays separating you from 9 wins. So if you're Boston College and you're looking at this season, those 10 to 15 plays have started to go your way. You beat Miami. You beat Virginia Tech. That wasn't always happening. So now you're in position to become that 9-win team. And I think now with that tangible proof, even the doubters have started to come around. Tell you what, they win on Saturday, and I don't think he's going to have to pay for a meal for a little while.
Clemson's a 20-point favorite against Boston College, even though the game's in prime time at Chestnut Hill. 45,000 filling the stadium. It's a sold-out crowd for one of the few times for Boston College, probably the biggest game that they've played at home in years and years and years. First ranked matchup in Chestnut Hill since 2006. The Matty Ice days there with the Eagles. Clemson, a 20-point favorite. Don't quite eclipse that. I like BC hanging tough. Clemson wins comfortably. Let's go with Clemson winning this one 34-17 over BC. I'll take the points, but barely, with Clemson moving on to 10-0 en route to an ACC championship. Catch all the coverage right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Friday and Sunday live streams over at SD1 Sports. Live streams here on Wednesday night and all day Saturday with instant analysis. Right here again, lock it in. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.